The Department of Defense has been given permission to take 110,000 acres of land along the U.S.-Mexico border. And this not only allows the United States broader control over border security, it could also result in additional criminal charges against illegal immigrants. Now, a key part of what's now taking place was started by an April 11th presidential memorandum. This was declared as a military mission for sealing the southern border of the United States and repelling invasion. Now, let me know what you think of what that memo says, right? Let me show you what it says. It says, our southern border is under attack from a variety of threats. The complexity of the current situation requires that our military take a more direct role in securing our southern border than in the recent past. Now, Trump notes that on January 20th, he had signed another executive order. An important part is how these interrelate. January 20th, he signed clarifying the military's role in protecting the territorial integrity of the United States. And using that, he was able to assign the U.S. military on a mission to repel what he said is an invasion of the United States. Now, this latest presidential action builds on the previous one. And what it does is it gives additional guidance and other things. It says that in order to accomplish the mission of his previous executive order, this one gives additional guidance for additional actions to the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of the Interior, the Secretary of Agriculture, and the Secretary of Homeland Security. And here's what it does. It says, 1, to provide for the use and jurisdiction by the Department of Defense over such federal lands, the important part here is federal lands, not private lands, including the Roosevelt Reservation and excluding federal Indian reservations that are reasonably necessary to enable military activities directed in this memorandum, including border barrier construction and emplacement of detection and monitoring equipment, and to provide for transfer and acceptance of jurisdiction over such federal lands in accordance with applicable law to enable military activities directed in this memorandum to occur on a military installation under the jurisdiction of the Department of Defense and for the designation of such federal lands as national defense areas by the Secretary of Defense. Let me explain what that means. Now, it goes on to allow the Secretary of the Interior and the Secretary of Defense to use parts of the Roosevelt Reservation. There's a big area there for these operations. That's around 60 feet wide. It runs along the U.S.-Mexico border. And then it goes even further by invoking Trump's declaration of a national emergency at the southern border. And in order to allow for the Secretary of the Interior to begin taking public land to carry out these operations, which are then provided to the Department of Defense to carry out its operations. In other words, federal lands all along the border, basically the entire border other than Texas. All of that land now is under military control. They're not seizing land from American citizens. They're not seizing land from farmers or anything like that. This is federal land. Anybody who's been to that area, you can go to what they call BLM land. It's government land. You can, go there and shoot guns normally. They've now put that under military control. And from here, basically, the Secretary of Defense can determine what type of military operations are needed, it says, within reason, to carry out the order. And here's a really important part in all of this. It says it allows the military to protect and maintain the security of military installations. What is the new military installation? Basically, the entire federal land along the border. And it can also use standards in line with the long-standing authority of a military installation commander to exclude persons from a military installation. So what this means effectively, all that land along the border is now designated as a military installation. If an individual trespasses on that, whether they're smuggling drugs or human trafficking or whatever else, they're then trespassing on military land, and the military can guard that like a military base. So, what does this really mean, right? Protecting, maintaining the security of a military installation. What does that have to do with broader security? Under this order, all that land is under the purview of the U.S. military. This means anybody trespassing on military land, they commit an additional crime, actually a couple crimes. And it also means that the military can guard the border with the same level of scrutiny and the same level of force that it would use to guard a U.S. military base. In particular, the order also invokes something important. That's Section 21 of the Internal Security Act of 1950. Already in place, they're merely invoking an already in place law. Now, according to that act, this makes it a misdemeanor crime if they enter the land. So if you enter that land, you can be fined up to $5,000, and anybody who enters it can then be put in prison for up to a year. And it also invokes the United States Code on protection of buildings, grounds, property, and persons. And if you read that actual code, it says the Secretary of Defense shall protect the buildings, grounds, meaning all that borderland now, and property that are under the jurisdiction, custody, and control of the Department of Defense and the persons on that property, meaning they have some additional powers here. What's key is that land along the border is now under the jurisdiction of the Department of Defense. It's their property now, it's their land. And those grounds, military-based grounds, are now under the Department of Defense. The United States Code gives very broad authority to the Department of Defense to protect this. And this includes giving them powers to enforce federal laws, to carry firearms, to make arrests without needing a warrant, and to arrest anybody on felony charges if they so much as believe that the person to be arrested has committed or is committing a felony. A felony like human trafficking, for example. A felony like drug trafficking, for example, meaning military court, meaning military law, meaning, well, you trespass on a military base, and if you bring drugs onto a military base, you're in big trouble. It also lets them serve warrants and subpoenas, and interesting here, it lets them conduct investigations on and off the property in question. If there's an offense has been committed against the property under the jurisdiction, custody, or control of the Department of Defense or persons on such property, meaning if you commit any crime that involved trespassing over that land, they can investigate you even on the U.S. interior. And if you understand, this basically does it on all land west of Texas. It's all of all the California border, all the Arizona border, all the New Mexico border. And if you cross that land, you've then committed a crime. They can actually investigate you even if you come deeper into the United States. That last part is especially interesting, right? Because look, not only do they have all these additional powers on that property specifically, that happens to be a huge swath of land along the border. They can conduct investigations, not even just arrests, investigations off the property in question, and do any offense it says that may have been committed against the property under this jurisdiction, custody, or control of the Department of Defense or persons on such property. And what could those crimes include? Well, that could be illegal entry of that land. That could be drug trafficking over that land. That could be human trafficking over that land, maybe other crimes. And I would assume that would mean also military court, because again, this is being enforced by military-based law, effectively. Now look, in my interpretation, this suggests that anybody who commits crimes that involve crossing the border will now also be in violation of those additional crimes. And since the military can investigate anybody who does that, even if they're no longer on that property, which now happens to be all along the U.S.-Mexico border, the military would also have the ability to investigate them off of that property, maybe even into the heartland of the United States. That could go a very long way, depending on how broadly they interpret this law. This gives them a lot of leeway to do operations. The big question is, well, how much of that leeway are they going to use? And what's also important, under that United States Code, which is invoked in writing in this law, it also lets the Secretary of Defense work with outside agencies. This is where it gets really interesting. It says this: the Secretary, meaning Pete Hegseth, may utilize the facilities and services of federal, state, and Indian, tribal, and local law enforcement agencies with the consent of those agencies, meaning they have to agree to it. Keep in mind, this is the agencies, not the local government. And it says it may reimburse those agencies for the use of their facilities and services. That includes the application of their powers of law enforcement. Now, this is just my interpretation again. It seems like this act could actually override some potential barriers with the sanctuary laws, right? Under those laws, various states, like California, for example, like Arizona, like New Mexico, they can forbid local law enforcement from working with border agents. But under this U.S. code, which is invoked in this, it basically establishes the border as a military facility. The military has the power to go after people who cross that land while committing crimes, and it gives the military the power to utilize local law enforcement agencies, other agencies, and their facilities, their buildings. It's not even just police, by the way. It's, federal law enforcement, it's state law enforcement, it's others. Now look, it's not clear whether this would apply retroactively. I would assume that you can't charge somebody for entering a military base if it was not previously military land. To me, at least, this seems to just apply to people who violate the laws going forward, basically from here on out. And that is, right, the law of trespassing on military land and any additional crimes that were committed while doing that. But the other wild card here is terrorists. And this is where it gets really interesting. Because, look, it also now happens the cartels and many gangs are now designated as terrorists. Importantly, a lot of the human traffickers and basically all of the drug traffickers work for the cartels. If those are now terrorist organizations committing crimes that on military land, that might be something they would need to investigate off of those facilities. And if they're investigating cartels, again, coyotes, human traffickers, off the land because they have committed this, or there's groups organizing and committing it, meaning it's not just as individuals, that can mean they can go after them. They can go after them on the border, they can go after them within the American heartland or even elsewhere. But again, it all depends on how broadly they use the interpretations of this law. The powers this could give to them are very broad. The question is, how much of that do they actually use? Now, with that said, this new order includes quite a bit of land. This is bigger than it may seem on the surface. It's not just, one little area. This is not just one small parcel of land or one little island. This is Newsweek. It says the U.S. Army will take control of almost 110,000 acres of federal land along the U.S.-Mexico border. The Department of Interior, the DOI, announced Tuesday that the land will be transferred to the Department of the Army to support U.S. Border Patrol for a period of 3 years. It says the transfer affects 109,651 acres of land in California, Arizona, and New Mexico, specifically along the border in areas overseen by the Bureau of Land Management, BLM Land. And the move is part of the President Donald Trump's efforts to seal the border, it says. It notes as well, earlier this month, the president issued a memo that authorized certain federal lands to be used for military use. This includes, it says, the Roosevelt Reservation, a 60-foot wide strip along the southern border spanning parts of New Mexico, California, and Arizona that was created in 1907 to prevent smuggling between the U.S. and Mexico. If you look at the actual map of this, this includes the U.S.-Mexico border effectively west of Texas. The Texas border is right here. Everything west of that, they now control an entire strip of land covering all of that effectively. And given that Texas has already been taking its own efforts on militarizing the border, remember even during the Biden administration, they were using the Texas military. The Texas National Guard is kind of like a military. Texas is a unique state when it comes to its military. The state military in Texas is effectively a normal standing military. They're already using that in Texas to secure their border. And so you take this all together, it's very big. Texas also is not a sanctuary state, unlike the other border states. What this does effectively, it acts to secure basically the entire land portion of the southern border. If you understand, everything west of Texas is now under federal, everything under Texas is being controlled by the Texas military. And by the way, that's in addition to Trump using the U.S. Navy and Coast Guard to secure the waters. Take this all as a whole. What does that mean? It means that, when it comes to waters, they don't need permission from the states to secure the ocean or the Gulf of America or anything like that. They can do that without needing permission from California or, Florida or something like that. This means basically the U.S. government has effectively secured the entire southern border, including the water, using the military. That's what this really means. Now, look, another question with all of this is, how do Americans feel about these types of actions? We've seen efforts to bring back the alleged MS-13 gang member from El Salvador, or the Maryland man, as many legacy media refer to him. Is that resonating with voters? Do they want that? Are they against this type of stuff? What about the operations we've seen against the gangs and the cartels? How about, border security just in general? Well, according to a recent poll from CNN, not only do most Americans broadly support border security, actually a majority of Americans would even support deporting every single illegal immigrant in the entire country. Watch this.
Deport all undocumented immigrants. Voters favoring the government trying to deport all 11 million of them. Back in 2016, just 38% of voters wanted the government to try to deport all 11 million undocumented immigrants. Compared to where we are in 2025, 56%, the majority. The American people have come a long way on this issue, much closer to Donald Trump, and I think that's a big part of the reason why Americans are increasingly saying the country is on the right track when it comes to immigration policy, and why Donald Trump's net approval rating on that issue is in the positive.
Now, take that as a whole, and what does it mean? Look, not everybody supports deporting everyone. What that does mean, though, is that in terms of polling, in terms of elections, if you make that your sole issue, you're probably going to lose the election. Most Americans, even Democrats, support mass deportations. That's not even including criminal aliens. If you look at those polls, it's even bigger than that. A much larger portion of America supports deporting those individuals. It's a losing proposition for elections, at least, if you try to get behind, guarding especially criminal aliens. Now, of course, there are some humanitarian concerns. Some people might be concerned about, what about the children being trafficked and so on. The argument with that is the military is now securing the border. A lot of the kids they have coming across the border, they've done, DNA tests before. They find a lot of them are actually being trafficked themselves. They'll oftentimes use children as the tools to come across more easily. The gangs actually kidnap children. They use them for that. Not saying they all are. What this does, though, it means that if they trespass on a military installation, they're going to be arrested. They're going to be going through a much harsher system. And you could argue this is not for the effect of, punishing people. It's for the effect of preventing them from coming in the first place. What this effectively does, it makes illegal immigration significantly more difficult. Significantly more difficult. This is even aside from the idea of whether they put the border wall in place. Keep in mind also that part of the operations are installing sensors and using other technologies to detect people. Take that in conjunction with, of course, the naval operations. That means even the operations of drug trafficking are going to be significantly difficult. I don't think you probably see, what you will probably end up seeing is a lot of people choosing to not even try in the first place. Actually, in addition to all of this as well, the Trump administration has also begun criminally charging illegal immigrants. Of course, in this new military law, they can imprison them for up to a year merely for trespassing. That does not include additional charges like human trafficking or drug trafficking, merely for trespassing. But the Trump administration has also been criminally charging people for repeat violations. There are some people facing a year in prison, 2 years in prison, 5 years in prison. They're saying they can put people in prison up to 20 years. And so they're making border security laws very harsh right now, very, very harsh right now. And again, the idea of that is it'll probably stop a lot of people from trying to come over in the first place. Now, importantly though, in terms of the military operations, an important factor here, a lot of the authority rests on the Secretary of Defense. Trump's whole operation with this, most of these powers are delegated to the Secretary of the Department of Defense. Who is that? That's Pete Hegseth. And you might remember also, of all of Trump's appointees, of all the people he appointed to his different positions, Pete Hegseth faced some of the strongest attempts to prevent him from being nominated. The media went after him harder than anybody, second only to Matt Gaetz. And Matt Gaetz, again, he was slated to be Attorney General. He actually backed out of the nomination because of the just massive campaign against him. They were going after him even in Congress. Pete Hegseth, number 2 of the most targeted individual by the military, and the pressure to remove him has not died down. There's a huge campaign trying to remove him from his position, and a lot of rumors as well. Now, there are 2 very drastically different realities being shown on this, depending on which side you're watching. If you go by the legacy media, if you tune in on the TV and you see what they're saying, you're probably seeing something like this. This is Wall Street Journal. They're alleging that Pete Hegseth is facing additional problems over his encrypted Signal chat group. Remember, that was the one where there was a big group of them, government officials and their assistants. Somebody added a journalist from The Atlantic, and then a whole scandal against Hegseth and others started to unfold. A big campaign to remove Hegseth was enacted, and there's some investigations on how that individual was added. Now, they're alleging there are more problems. There's now chaos in the Pentagon, if you read a lot of the legacy media. And look, there is actually some truth to that. There is some degree of chaos there, and you can see it on the surface. Several top officials around Defense Secretary Hegseth have actually been removed from their positions. A lot of top officials in the Pentagon are being removed. A lot of this took place after journalist Laura Loomer alleged that several defense officials were disloyal to President Trump. Now remember, in the United States, the President of the United States is the Commander-in-Chief. And that has some additional rules. That means if a military officer, if a general, if the head of a military department is disloyal to the president, they can actually be discharged. They can be removed from their position. You might remember Obama did that. When Obama was president, he removed tons of generals. When Obama was president, Stanley McChrystal, for example, there was an article in Rolling Stone, and he said some criticisms against Obama in the Rolling Stone article. Obama removed him from his position because the president is the commander-in-chief. If you are a military officer and you so much as criticize the commander-in-chief, you can be removed from your position. Meaning, when it comes to military positions, it's much easier to remove them. A report came out, Laura Loomer submitted this to individuals within the presidential office, and alleged that there were several disloyal individuals in the Pentagon. After that report came out, many of them were removed, saying that effectively they were acting against the administration. Pete Hegseth has now come out saying there are a lot of people who've been leaking to the media. They're alleging effectively that there were individuals within the top brass of the Pentagon who are acting against the President of the United States. And so the chaos you're watching is part of that. Now, look, it's not totally clear whether Trump actually took that warning as the basis for the firings that we're seeing on the surface, but the timing does line up. And so far, the officials removed from the Pentagon, just a handful of them, these include the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Chief of Naval Operations, the Air Force's Vice Chief of Staff, a lot of top officials. And this series of removals, it's raised speculation and some reports saying that Donald Trump might remove Pete Hegseth. the Secretary of Defense. This is NPR. They declared this, quote, exclusive. The White House is looking to replace Pete Hegseth as Defense Secretary. But look, according to the Trump administration itself, that's a big fat lie. It's a rumor. It is absolutely not true. They say it is not true that Pete Hegseth is on the list for removal. Effectively, what you have right now are two scandals. There's the media scandal, the Signalgate scandal, which the Trump administration publicly seems to not really care about. And there's the actual scandal, the list of disloyal top brass of the military being removed by the Trump administration. A lot of media reports are basically just mixing these two and suggesting that Hegseth is going to be removed as part of this operation. The Trump administration has repeatedly said that is not true. Trump spoke about this over the weekend at the White House's Easter event. Watch this.
Are you bringing up Signal again? I thought they gave that up 2 weeks ago.
There was a new report this weekend that you used it in a separate chat that included some family members.
It's all just the same old stuff from the media. That's an old one. Try finding something new.
Now, in another part of that interview, Trump also defends Pete Hegseth directly. And he says he is doing a great job. And then he says, ask the Houthis how he's doing. And of course, look, the administration has been bombing the terrorist group, the Houthis. And the White House accounts have actually been posting videos of them bombing the Houthis. But Trump also went on to suggest that the alleged scandal right now around the Signal chat is just another smear campaign, just another attempt to undermine the administration. Basically the exact same thing that the media has been doing against Donald Trump literally for a decade. Literally for the last decade, because 2015 is when the whole Trump presidency and the elections all started. Trump has been targeted by the media in fake hit pieces and scandals and Washington scandals literally for a decade. And in terms of what Trump is saying, this is just a continuation of that. And it seems also this is an important part of the whole picture. The recent removal of several top defense officials was not about the Signal chat. The way the media is framing it is not accurate in that light. A lot of media are painting it to suggest this is all part of the same scandal. It is not. Those firings were more about allegations that officials in the Pentagon were working against the Trump administration, not that they were tied up in some communication scandal. Although you could argue there were allegations that they were leaking to the press. Pete Hegseth is not involved with that. The other allegation is these individuals were even acting against Pete Hegseth. They were acting against him, allegedly. So look, these are two very different issues, and a lot of critics are trying to mash them together to create a big scandal, basically. Now, the White House press secretary, Karoline Leavitt, she also clarified this during an interview with Fox News' Fox and Friends. Watch.
The president stands strongly behind Secretary Hegseth, who is doing a phenomenal job leading the Pentagon. And this is what happens when the entire Pentagon is working against you and working against the monumental change that you are trying to implement. Secretary Hegseth was nominated for this position because he is standing up for the war fighter, the men and women in uniform who are putting their lives on the line to protect our country and our homeland. And unfortunately, there have been people at that building who don't like the change the secretary is trying to bring, so they are leaking and they are lying to the mainstream media. We've seen this game played before. The secretary is doing a tremendous job, and the president stands strongly behind him.
Caroline.
So, in other words, it seems the official position of the White House and Donald Trump himself is that Donald Trump is standing with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. He's not planning to remove him. And some of the Pentagon leaders who have now been removed are allegedly some who were leaking to the media and acting against the interests of Pete Hegseth and against Donald Trump and his administration. Now, Secretary Hegseth also addressed this directly during an interview over the weekend at the White House's Easter egg roll event. Watch this.
What a big surprise that a few leakers get fired and suddenly a bunch of hit pieces come out from the same media that peddled the Russia hoax. Won't give back their Pulitzers. They got Pulitzers for a bunch of lies. See, this is what the media does. They take anonymous sources from disgruntled former employees, and then they try to slash and burn people and ruin their reputations. Not going to work with me, because we're changing the Defense Department, putting the Pentagon back in the hands of warfighters, and anonymous smears from disgruntled former employees on old news doesn't matter. So I'm happy to be here at the Easter egg roll with my dad and my kids, because, you know, this is what we're doing it for. These kids right here. This is why we're fighting the fake news media. This is why we're fighting slash and burn Democrats. This is why we're fighting hoaxsters. Hoaxsters. This group, no, this group right here, full of hoaxsters that peddle anonymous sources from leakers with access to grind, and then you put it all together as if it's some news story.
Now, remember as well, important context, Pete Hegseth used to be a Fox News host, so he knows how the media works. You can see here when he's addressing the media, he seems to be a bit unhappy with them. He used to be among that group. He knows how they operate. He knows what they're doing. Folks, let me tell me what you think. What do you think what's happening on Pete Hegseth? Is it just noise? Let me know. Leave a comment below. But in other news, look, a big move right now is happening as well. The White House has updated the COVID-19 website with the words lab leak. I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. The White House has made some big changes to its COVID-19 website. Now, you might be wondering what's happening with COVID-19. Why would the White House change the COVID-19 website? Is there a new alert? Well, the White House published this in a post on X. It stated in all caps, definitely don't visit http://covid.gov. Don't go there, they said. And if you did not listen to them and went there, you would have seen the Trump administration has now significantly changed that website. Now first, before I show you this, let me show you what that web page used to look like. This right here, this is an archived page of that exact website from March 2022. This is under the Biden administration. As you can see, it includes guidance on how to stay safe from COVID. It includes an advisory on wearing a face mask in public, how to get tested for COVID-19. It includes an alert that, quote, being fully vaccinated and boosted is the best way to protect against severe illness and hospitalization from COVID-19. And now, what has changed? Well, if you visit that exact same website right now, you'll find that it's very different. This is what it now looks like. The Trump administration has replaced covid.gov, that whole website, with a full page with linked reports on the lab leak origin. At the very top it says this, quote, lab leak, the true origins of COVID-19. And it states at the top as well, quote, the origins, the proximal origins of SARS-CoV-2 publication, which was used repeatedly by public health officials and the media to discredit the lab leak theory, was prompted by Dr. Fauci to push the preferred narrative that COVID-19 originated naturally. And from there, it basically debunks that entire claim. The page gives a basic overview laying out the key points on, what really happened. It then goes more into detail on how the world was lied to about the origins of COVID. This includes a link to the House Oversight Report, which investigates the entire thing. It details the proximal origin paper keep in mind, folks, look, I did the original documentary before anyone was talking about it, tracing the origins of COVID. I showed basically all of this research before it was even being talked about. The Proximal Origins paper actually came out after my documentary. And of course, the Proximal Origins paper was used to effectively censor anybody who said otherwise. Anybody who talked about possible lab leak origin, they were censored mainly because of that. It also goes, though, into the gain of function research that was being done and on the alleged role of various health organizations and officials in the scandal. This could become significant because, Trump actually removed the Biden pardons of some of these officials. It's possible some of them could face criminal charges. And if you read this whole thing, the Trump administration basically lays out really serious claims against some of these people and organizations. Now, further in, it also details the actions of many public officials and policies which obstructed investigations into the virus origin. Case in point, the censorship campaign against me started when I did the documentary on this. And so I was massively censored because I, again, talked about the virus origins. And then it goes on to detail how failures of COVID response policies happened across the board, basically. It talks about how the social distancing things didn't work, the mask mandates did not work, lockdowns did not work, and a lot of other policies that were put into place basically following recommendations from the Chinese Communist Party that did not work. It's a big deal, frankly, folks. Now, the big question, though, I'd say is what comes next? Well, great, they told us all of this. What are they going to do after this? We'll have to wait and see. There is a real possibility they might start having criminal charges. The Trump administration they actually have now begun launching additional investigations. There are some criminal investigations beginning against some elected officials and others who were involved in, for example, policies that led to severe deaths in retirement homes and things like that. They're actually launching some investigations into that as we speak. And as I mentioned as well, Donald Trump actually revoked a lot of Biden's pardons, alleging that because they were signed with an auto pen, they were not officially signed by the president. There's a big legal debate over whether Trump can actually do that. But you might see, and they're laying out the basic foundations for this, it seems here, you might actually see some criminal charges of individuals and groups that were involved not only in the cover-up, but even in bad policies enacted during COVID. And remember, a lot of people argued during that time that some of the policies violated constitutional rights of Americans. Some of the policies may have actually harmed more people than they helped. Again, forcing retirement homes to take people who had COVID, which led to a lot of elderly people dying from COVID, for example. Again, we'll have to see what they do with it. Now, folks, before we jump into questions, today is the last day of our Easter sale. So that means if you want to get a very good deal to subscribe to the Epoch Times, do it now. Today is the last day. You can get a great deal for the Epoch Times, and not only do you get access to a wonderful library of my shows and special features, you also get access to our documentaries, my investigations, others, and also some great content, video, infographics, special reports on issues that I'd say really matter the most from the Epoch Times. And not only that, but you also support my work, given the fact that I've been demonetized and censored going back to the beginning of COVID-19 because I dared talk about this stuff. So go to ept.ms, and if you want to help me out, put /Easter sale Josh. And I'll also put the description below this video if you want to click on that. Today is the last day to get this big deal. Don't miss out. Go there now, subscribe to the Epoch Times. You'll be helping me, supporting my work, and also be getting some great content for yourself. So that said, let's jump into some questions, folks. All right, first off here, Martin McKenzie, you're saying, using the U.S. military to defend our border should not be controversial. Why does this need to be explained? Yeah, well, on that point, I don't want to repeat this too much because I've said it several times. One of the sole original authorities of the federal government of the United States is to secure the borders of the United States. And, technically we have Border Patrol to carry out those operations. Border Patrol was not always around. And so, yeah, the military used to do some of that. Look, the country is not that old. If you go back to the 1800s, we were still fighting the Indian Wars. And a lot of the frontier was, the U.S. military and U.S. Marshals fighting against, Indian tribes. We still had that going on up until the early 1900s, as crazy as that may sound. And so border security used to be a military operation. It used to be a military operation. Go and watch some of the old Western movies. Watch Stagecoach. If you haven't seen Stagecoach, go watch Stagecoach. You can see that there used to be military stations and bases that helped secure the frontiers of the United States, the borders of the country. And that was, in fact, a military operation. The concern now is that we now have cartels and human traffickers and drug traffickers killing about 100,000 Americans every single year with fentanyl. And if you understand what that means, it means we're losing more people every single year than would be killed in an entire war. Let that sink in. Fentanyl and drugs are killing more Americans than a war, than a full-scale war. And that's being done as a for-profit move by a lot of these individuals trafficking across the southern border and the northern border, actually, too. One of the biggest drug facilities was actually found in Canada. And a lot of that is also being run by the Chinese Communist Party. And so should the U.S. military secure that? You make the call on that. Now, the other side of that argument is some people say it's a humanitarian issue. If it's a humanitarian issue and they have actual justified humanitarian reasons to seek refuge in the United States, we have what's called amnesty. They can still come to the United States and apply for amnesty. I personally know many people who are applying for amnesty. America is not getting rid of that. We still have it. There's also a very, very broad legal process for entering the United States. You don't have to illegally enter to come to the United States. All arguments aside, all criticisms aside, America, the United States, has the most lenient, most open migration policy of almost any country on the face of the planet. We have a more open immigration system than all of Canada. We have a more open immigration system than all of Latin America, all of Africa, all of Asia, and most of Europe. America has the most open immigration system of any country on the face of the planet, even aside from all the criticisms. We allow a lot of people in for amnesty. We allow a lot of people in for green cards. We allow a lot of people coming in for normal, legal immigration. And so, if you want to have people, illegally entering, that's a whole different issue. There's a line you have to get in. There's a process for it. And effectively what the military is doing, and they're saying, you can no longer just jump across and do whatever you want. There's a process for this. You got to get in line. You got to go through the normal legal process if you want to come in. And, the other issue we have is that when it comes to, the issue of mass illegal immigration, a lot of gangs use it. A lot of cartels use it. To the extent that they'll even facilitate border raids in one area to keep Border Patrol busy, and they'll do all their drug trafficking and even terrorist trafficking over here while they're distracting Border Patrol with, using illegal immigrants over here. It's a very dirty business. You have a lot of very corrupt individuals within these cartels. My friend Oscar Ramirez, journalist with Real America's Voice, again, I was working with him down in Panama when we were investigating the border crisis. Oscar Ramirez has been posting, because he's a Mexican journalist, he's in Mexico. He's been posting about mass graves, death camps of the cartels. He has had reports saying there are mass graves along the border. Because what's happening is you have these people going to cross illegally. The cartels run all of that. If you have a Mexican family or a Honduran family or a Venezuelan family and they can't pay the cartels, they murder them and they dump their bodies in mass graves on the other side of the border. Is that humanitarian? Is that a humanitarian operation? You tell me. And so the issue you have now is we've effectively allowed gangs, human traffickers, murderers to control a multi-billion-dollar industry. Do you want that? Or do you want to have a normal, legal migration operation of the most open country on the face of the planet? Which do you prefer? And that's, of course, the argument with it, right? Old Beanblower, you're saying, does that mean Mexico will be committing an act of war if they cross it? Good question. Okay, so I don't know if any of you have ever been to some of the borderland, California. Look, I mean, I grew up in Southern California. I'm from San Diego originally. I traveled around a lot. Where I grew up in Spring Valley, which you can drive to the border. You can see Tijuana from my house. Let's put it that way. It's like a 10-minute drive. You know what I mean? There's a lot of land along the border that's government land. Bureau of Land Management, BLM land. BLM, Bureau of Land Management. I know this very well because my family, all the guys love to shoot guns, and you can legally go to BLM land and in some parts shoot your guns. And so, if you don't want to go and pay a bunch of money at a gun range, you can go to BLM land. It's for a lot of people there. For my family, it was a normal weekend. All the guys go out, we shoot targets together. It's fun, right? If you make the mistake of going a little bit too far, you're on Mexico land. And if you are shooting targets and having fun, or if you're shooting onto Mexican territory, the federales will come and they will go after you like you wouldn't believe. So you got to be really careful. If you're firing guns onto their side of the border, or if you accidentally step a little too far, they will come and arrest you, and you're going to have a very, very bad time. I cannot emphasize how bad of a time you will have. You will have a very bad time. And so, there are issues with that, right? Now, the Mexican troops, they typically, this is the other side of it. When you go to the Mexican border, the U.S.-Mexico border, you have the border wall. Technically, the American land does not necessarily begin at the border wall. America actually has a buffer zone. And you do actually have Mexican border security, the federales and stuff, who will go up to the wall. Now, does that mean that you have Mexican troops trespassing on American territory? Technically. But America, we never do anything about it. When I was doing my own investigations, we actually got it on video. There were Mexican troops trespassing on the American side of the wall. There was a big rocky hill. They were up there smoking pot. We got them on video doing it. You can see them up there, right? They're Mexican soldiers. They were doing that. We got them on video doing it. But America doesn't do anything about it. It's just how things are, right? And so the United States is working with Mexico on this kind of stuff. We're working with them very, very closely now, even on operations going against the cartels. You could argue that if Mexico trespasses onto American land, they're violating it. I seriously doubt America would declare that Mexico is invading. I don't think Trump by any means wants to start beef with the Mexican military. What he wants is for Mexico to work with us against the cartels. The challenge you have with that is the cartels have a lot of insiders. They buy off a lot of people. One of the reasons why the federales, Mexico police, Mexican military, they always cover their faces is because they risk being targeted by the cartels. The cartels will kill their families. They'll go after them. It's really bad. And, without the United States helping support them, they're under a lot of danger. The cartels are very powerful. And so, that's kind of how it is, right? So, yeah, Old Bean, if they really wanted to go by the word of the law, they could probably arrest like Mexican military when they do that kind of stuff. I say almost without a doubt they will not do that because it's just how it is, right? Troy NM, you're saying, does some version of socialism and communism predate Marx et al. Or even the French Revolution? Is it always? Okay, history lesson, right? Communism and socialism predate Karl Marx. I did a whole series on this. If you haven't watched it, go and watch they're short videos. They're real digestible. It's called The Dark Origins of Communism. You can watch the series I did on it. I go back to the French Revolution. I go earlier. I go over some of the key figures. I go over the pre-Marx stuff. I explain this whole history, so I won't detail all of it right now. The first revolutionary communist was a guy they called the Rousseau of the gutter. And this was a guy who was part of the Cercle Social, or the Society of the Friends of Truth, which was one of these weird underground societies you had kind of leading the French Revolution. The Society of the Friends of Truth, also called the Cercle Social, ran both the Girondins and the Montagnards, the groups that carried out the French Revolution. And so, yeah, the first revolutionary communist can be traced to that. From within that organization, you had several key individuals who went on to be the foundation of what became communism and what led to the discussions of Karl Marx. The connections go like this. From the Society of the Friends of Truth, French Revolution. From the French Revolution, François-Noël Gracchus-Babeuf. From him, he tried launching his conspiracy of equals, arrested, executed. From him, you had a group inspired by his movement called the League of Outlaws. The League of Outlaws changed its name to the League of the Just. The League of the Just, the leadership ran the Paris Commune of 1861 or 1871. And from there, this group merged. Again, the guy who ran this became this. Karl Marx would be right here. This group merged with some of the workers' parties. They created the Communist League. Marx and Engels were part of the Communist League. And effectively what they did was they standardized what would become modern atheistic communism. Because there was a debate within the communist movements over whether it would be religious or atheistic. The religious side of it was a group called the Communist Church. They have some freaky writings, including merging God into Satan. I'm not even joking. And and that was the whole argument. So Karl Marx was not the forefather of communism. He merely standardized it, and he also made it. He basically told the communists they don't have to debate with economists or sociologists, because a lot of people were debating over whether communism would actually work, and communism was basically dead by the time of Karl Marx, because in terms of open debate, it was determined to be a non-functioning system. Marx said, you don't have to debate with those bourgeois intellectuals, and basically said, don't listen to people saying it won't work, just do it anyway. That was Karl Marx. If you go back earlier, communism traces back to a lot of the Gnostic cults, Albigensianism, Rosicrucianism, and a lot of other just weird satanic organizations. And I mean that literally. The Rosicrucians were Luciferians, for example. And even going back to like the 1600s and the 1700s, they were talking about launching a revolution to overthrow the religions and the kings of Europe. They wanted to overthrow God and kings. And they even had a lot of publications throughout the 1700s saying they were going to be launching a revolution to carry that out. The history is weird, which makes it really hard to talk about. It makes it hard to talk about the origins of communism, because pre-Marx, it's all religious. Before Marx, communism is a religious movement. and not only is it religious, it's a satanic movement, pre-Marx. And so a lot of people, they're not ready for that debate, let's say. And it makes you sound crazy if you talk about it, unfortunately. But watch my series, The Dark Origins of Communism, if you want to learn more. Maybe we'll see about doing more on it, folks. Another question here from Ashton, California, saying everyone just does communism wrong. These college kids will do it right this time, right? They'll do it right this umpteenth time. Yeah, actually, plot twist. Everybody did it right. Communism was by design meant to destroy society. For the purpose of communism, a lot of the theories of it pulled from Hegelianism. Hegel, if you go back to the 1800s, when Marx was formulating the theories of communism, they used a lot of the theories from Hegel. At the time in Germany, Hegelianism was one of the main metaphysical theories outside of established religion. It was evil. It was a dark occult religion. It was occultism. Hegel had a theory called the negation of the negation. And it's the idea that if you destroy something, something else will be born from the destruction, which is why a lot of them use, the firebird as their symbol, which it's the mythological bird that rises from the ashes of its own destruction. The theory of Hegel was through the destruction of the egg, the chicken is born, And Marx said, well, if you destroy all of society, something else will be born in its place. Effectively, what Marx wanted to do was to root out the influence of religion from human society. And the theory was this. The idea was that man would perfect the creations of God, right? That was the occult idea they had, going back to Gnosticism and stuff. The theory of communism was that God was imperfect, and that the mission of man was to perfect the imperfections. Look at how well that worked. Right? 150 million people killed, and unless you believe that post-communist Russians are the most evolved people on the earth, then communism does not work. Let's put it that way. But Marx's idea pulled from Hegelianism, and he believed that if you destroy everything of human society that was influenced by religion, only then could man create a new world based purely on the influence of man. And so you have to destroy religion, you have to destroy culture, you have to destroy the family structure, you have to destroy art and sculptures and history, which is why every communist movement, from the Soviets to the Chinese Communist Party, they destroyed all the ancient monuments, they destroyed all the ancient statues, they dug up statues, they destroyed them too. It's why the French communists, they almost destroyed the Louvre. They almost burned down the Louvre, actually, during the Paris Commune of 1861. They wanted to destroy all of human tradition because they believed, Hegelianism, negation of the negation, that you have to destroy everything so that humanity would have nothing to pull from. And effectively, you would have it go back to day zero. And if you understand a lot of communist holidays, they refer to their revolution as day zero, the restart of humanity, and they enshrine their own leaders as God. You can go to China and you can worship Karl Marx. You can go to North Korea and you can worship Kim Jong-un. You could go to Soviet Russia and you could worship Joseph Stalin, because they overthrew God and they put their communist leaders in the seat of God because you were worshiping man, not God. That's what communism was. It was a rebellion against the God-made world, the world influenced by religion. And that's purely what it was. And if you understand the origins of it in Rosicrucianism, the origins of it in naturism, the origins of it in all the other weird Gnostic cults, they were all based on the theory of why does evil exist. And the two theories they had was because God is imperfect and God created everything, or everything is perfect, and so you should embrace every filthy thing. The naturists, for example, believed that if God made everything, then it means that everything is of God. And so, case in point, a lot of the people who ran the French Revolution were naturists. They were naturists, also known as Luciferians. The Rosicrucians held this. They were naturists. They were Luciferians. They believed that everything you desire is good. Every human urge is good. It is of human nature. And so if you want to kill somebody, that's human nature. Look at the animal kingdom. If you want to engage in lust or desire or whatever else, human nature, right? And if you believe that, then what is evil? If you believe that everything that emerges from human desire or human urge is good, then what is evil? They believed that religion was then evil because religion sets in place moral standards. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not steal, so on, right? That if you believe in morality, morality inhibits human primal urge. And so what did they do? They killed the Christians. During the French Revolution, they had the de-Christianization movement, for example, case in point, where they killed priests, they mass murdered peasants, they mass murdered everybody. You know what I mean? They were going into villages and they would tie people up and they'd shoot them with cannonballs with chains tied between them, and they'd cut people in half. They put people on barges and they'd sink them into frozen rivers. Yeah, that's what you get when you eliminate religion, right? And every communist organization has always done that. They always do that. Anyways, folks, not to get into crazy history with y'all, but communism hasn't changed. The only difference between modern communists and the older ones is the modern ones do not know any of this history. They do not know what they're practicing. They don't understand the roots of any of their beliefs. Most of them don't even understand the actual beliefs themselves. But you can still see them doing it. Case in point, modern communist influence. What are they doing? They're trying to destroy history. They're saying, what is evil? In the current political debates, what is considered evil? Purely politically. It is not if you believe in traditional good and evil. You are considered evil if you tell another person that their indulgences are evil. If you criticize a person's free will to do anything, do as thou wilt, you are considered the bad guy. It's because they're practicing naturism. It's the generational, influence of these ideas where people have completely forgotten the origins of it. They're so disconnected from the origins of the theories that they practice it without understanding the roots of it. And I'd say you really cannot understand modern political debates without knowing the roots of these things. If you understand the origins of these ideas, you can see clearly what is now taking place in the world and the influences of it. And again, it goes back to all this stuff. So again, long story, a lot of stuff, but to that point, the people saying they're doing it wrong, they're doing exactly what Karl Marx intended. Communism is designed to destroy society. Communism is designed to create famine. It is designed to create mass campaigns of murder. It is designed to destroy human morality. It is designed to destroy tradition and history and art and culture and everything else. It is a tool to destroy a society because it is based in the Hegelian theory of the negation of the negation, the absolute destruction of all that previously existed. It is designed to do that. And people who implement it and say, wow, why is my society being destroyed suddenly? Because that's what it's designed to do. And they don't know this. Maybe some of them know it. I'd say most of them don't know it, but some of them know it. But again, also why I'd say it's important to know this history. You can watch my series on it, The Dark Origins of Communism, which you can watch on Epoch TV. So check that out. All the more reason to subscribe for our Easter sale if you want to watch that series. I made the videos short so they're more digestible. It's a lot to take in all at once, so I did shorter episodes, piece by piece, and you can watch that whole series. Last question here, Angel Baumbach 1. You're saying, I've read several articles about Americans born here, raised here, are getting letters that they need to leave the country because they are illegal. Is this propaganda or accidental or something else? I don't know. I've personally not heard any of these stories. I do think you have a lot of mainstream media saying that. This is where it gets complicated. Okay, I've seen some of the mainstream media articles on it. I have not personally heard any individual stories. And every time I have looked into the media stories, they bury the lead, and you find that they're effectively lying through omission within the first few paragraphs of their articles. It's usually like this. I saw one article yesterday, and you had them saying that there was a guy, I believe he was a Chinese national, he got pulled over and told that he's no longer, that he needs to go back, he's getting deported. And they're like, he was not told why. And then you go further into the article and it says he was told why. He committed a crime, he violated a law. And because he violated that law, he was getting deported. And the media, this is unfortunately what you see a lot of media do. I don't know if they do it intentionally or not. They will make a headline that is absolutely misleading. They will make a very misleading headline. The first paragraph or two of their article restates the basis of their headline, and you might think something terrible is happening. And it's not unless you read to the very bottom of the article that you find the caveat to the whole thing. You find that basically, if you read to the bottom of it, it gives the other elements of the story that effectively debunk the entire foundation of the story. And so you can't really criticize these media of lying. The truth is there. It's just buried at the very bottom of the article. The problem you have is most people don't read the entire articles. Most people only read the headline. A very large majority who go beyond reading just the headline only read the first couple paragraphs. And so most people will never read to the bottom where they get the full context of the story. And when in the articles I've seen that do this, they will bury at the very bottom of the story, or towards the bottom, the reason why the person was deported. And then you see that there was a reason for it, and you see it was, to an extent, justified. That's even if they do that. And then what happens is, you'll get the first article that does that, and then a lot of media rewrite that article. They'll do follow-up pieces. And the follow-up pieces might not even include that part. And so you'll have articles built upon articles built upon articles, and over time they start no longer giving the full context. That then creates a narrative, and then what happens? You have public officials and experts and talking heads who comment on those articles, and their commentary becomes, Trump is deporting people who are American citizens, and they're getting these letters, and they're told they have to leave, because those people either only read the headline, or only read the first couple paragraphs, or heard rumors. And then what happens? Media, news agencies, write additional stories based purely on the statements of those individuals. Expert says, according to experts, Donald Trump is deporting people who are American citizens without reason, because they're then basing their articles on the commentary of those individuals who are misinformed because they never actually read the full context of those stories. And from there, the whole narrative takes on a life of its own. It's the way the media system works. It is one of the things I dislike the most about how the media system works, which is why, if you watch Crossroads, you can see that I don't like giving headlines, right? If you watch Crossroads, you'll notice that I make an attempt to really go deep into issues. I really try to give you the full context, because I think without that you can be misled. And I don't know if other media do it intentionally. Either that or they're being lazy. It's one of the two. But I think it's but intentional or not, I think it's irresponsible. And the fact that a lot of media base their articles merely off of commentary or expert says this, if that expert has been misinformed by not doing their due diligence, you're just creating a news cycle based on nothing. It's a news cycle that's just false. And I think it's I don't think it's responsible. I don't think it's responsible the way a lot of media do that kind of stuff, which is why I don't do it, right? All right, folks, that said, again, today is the last day of our Easter sale. If you are not yet subscribed to the Epoch Times and you want to support my work, because I've been demonetized going back to January 6th especially, but also back to the COVID origins, because I dared telling you all the truth about COVID. Subscribe to Epoch Times. You will support my work. You'll also get access to our fantastic content, including the one I mentioned today, the Dark Origins series. If you haven't watched it yet, go watch it. Go to ept.ms/Easter Sale Josh. You can find the link as well in the description below this video. Go check it out. At the very least, go and click that link and look there and make your decision there. But you will be supporting us in our work here. And of course, keeping everything going, because you might notice I'm still demonetized on YouTube. So folks, hopefully that'll change one day, but we'll see. That said, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate all of you. Join me tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Today is Tuesday. I'm learning my days of the week. Join me tomorrow. I'll see you then. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.